Haiti electoral authorities have announced a new date for the constitutional referendum pushed through the President Jovenel Moïse. In Venezuela, the vaccination plan against COVID-19 advances with the administration of Cuba's Abdala vaccine. In Belgium, hundreds of immigrants staged a hunger strike demanding medical care in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the House. I'm your host, Gladys Quesada, and now we begin in Haiti, where electoral authorities have announced a new date for an unconstitutional referendum, the end of September. Jovenel Moïse, a president largely considered illegitimate, wants to hold a referendum precisely to legitimize the post he has clung onto illegally since February when his term ended. The electoral authorities announced September 26 as the date of the vote, which has already been postponed twice. Moïse has faced widespread unrest since February, with thousands on the streets demanding his resignation in the face of an ever-deepening economic and social crisis. This in a country where the word crisis is an accurate description of the normality for 99% of the population. Not one Haitian has yet been vaccinated by the state, but Moïse authorized the importation of vaccines by private companies. And this Tuesday, a 5.1 magnitude earthquake was registered in the Cuban province of Artemisa, but no material damage or injuries were reported. The National Center for Seismological Research informed that the quake occurred at midday, as well as being felt by residents in the province located some 60 kilometers from the capital. There were also reports that tremors were felt in several high buildings in the city of Havana and in some areas of the islands of Youth. Some buildings were evacuated as a precaution. In Ecuador, Swedish computer programmer Ola Bini will go on trial, charged with attempting cyber attacks. Bini is an advocate of open software and was the first arrested in 2019 in connection with former President Moreno's betrayal of investigative journalist Julian Assange, then an Ecuadorian citizen wanted by the United States for whistleblowing human rights abuses. He was sheltered at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. As Assange was delivered to British authorities, Moreno's government came up with an alleged cyber attack conspiracy against Ecuador. 2 years later, the trial will resume, even though the prosecution has never been able to produce one single piece of hard evidence against him. Indigenous communities in Brazil continue to demonstrate against Bill 4.10, which threatens their protected land rights, opening territory up to private commercial exploitation. Communities have mobilized since last week in the capital, Brasilia, where the bill received the approval of a committee of the Chamber of Deputies last Thursday. They have been met with police repression. If made law, Bill 490 will permit illegal mining, agribusiness, and other extractive operations in tidal indigenous territories nationwide, flying in the face of communities' rights as well as environmental concerns. Meanwhile, the indigenous movement had also rejected the appointment of Joaquín Álvaro Pereira as the new Minister of the Environment due to his alleged links to the lodging industry. And now a piece of good news. 2 cups of the only native beer in South America, the Frontin, also known as Jucumari, were discovered in the Andean region of Venezuela. These 2 offsprings were caught by a hidden camera placed by researchers from the University of Los Andes in 2020. It is good news both because they are alive and well, and their presence is evidence that the environmental conditions for their safety are granted. A beer mother will not place cubs anywhere near humans and other threats. They are known as the spectacled beer because and have a presence in the mountains of Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia, and are in danger of extinction. These images only bring hope. The National Electoral Council of Venezuela advances in the process of postulations for the regional elections of next November 21. NEC President Pedro Calzadilla confirms more than 250,000 new voters on the electoral roll. The maximum autonomy of the electoral body reiterated that there is an express ban on the placement of seats or tents by any political party around the polling centers during the elections. 200 years ago, on June 29, 2021, the Spanish authorities of Caracas, Venezuela, surrendered to the Liberation Army led by Simón Bolívar, who entered the capital in triumph. This was 5 days after the epic Battle of Carabobo, northwest of Caracas, where Spain's colonial troops suffered a crushing defeat, thus sealing Venezuela's independence. Now we'll take a short break, but let's listen to a musical piece of the artistic homage to Simón Bolívar during the celebrations of the bicentenary of the Carabobo battle. Enjoy the music. Welcome back. In Venezuela, the vaccination plan against COVID-19 advances with the administration of Cuba's Abdala vaccine. The process is being carried out in the urban complex of Fuerte Tiuna in the capital, Caracas. People of different ages are receiving the Cuban-made jabs, which have shown efficacy of 92.28%. The first shipment of Abdala doses arrived in Venezuela last week as part of an agreement for a total of 12 million between the governments of the two countries. The Brazilian government has cancelled an agreement to purchase 20 million Covaxin vaccine doses from India after a corruption scandal broke out regarding accusations that President Jair Bolsonaro aggressively pushed for the costly deal. On Monday, 3 Brazilian senators filed a lawsuit before the Supreme Court to investigate whether Bolsonaro committed the crime of prevarication by turning a blind eye to suspicions of corruption in the purchase of the Indian vaccine for $300 million. The Parliamentary Commission investigating the handling of the pandemic by the government is now focusing on why the president pushed for a costly vaccine, which was not even approved by the Brazilian drug regulator or the World Health Organization. In Mexico, health authorities have reported an increase in the number of confirmed cases of COVID-19. However, the number of hospitalizations and deaths continue to fall. Meanwhile, the national vaccination plan is progressing. Our correspondent, Eduardo Martinez, brings us more details in the following report.
National vaccination plan to address the pandemic caused by the novel coronavirus continues. At this stage, people between 40 and 49 years of age are receiving their first doses of the 6 available vaccines.
The truth is that I'm very excited and grateful I have made it to this day, because I thought it was still far off. I thought I would not make it, and I'm very happy and this is going to get better.
Those who receive their first vaccine dose feel more confident about being able to carry out their daily activities, especially those who at some point experience first-hand the effects of COVID-19.
Unfortunately, I experienced it. I got infected. Thanks God I'm still here and I'm telling you about it. And now with this vaccine I feel safer, calmer. People should not hesitate to come and get vaccinated. They should do it for everyone's sake.
Health authorities report that despite an increase of up to 11% in the number of confirmed cases, hospitalization and death remain on a downward trend. According to the latest report, the occupancy rate of general care beds is 17%. According to data from the National Institute of Genomic Medicine, as of June 18th, there were 223 cases of the coronavirus strain known as Delta. The Undersecretary of Health made a statement on the issue, which is sparking concern among citizens. So far, the scientific evidence on whether they are more aggressive is not conclusive. What does more aggressive mean? That they are more likely to cause patients to develop a severe or even lethal disease. None of the strains known as variants of concern B or C, according to the English abbreviations, are clearly considered more aggressive. So far, the country has received 52.7 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine and 30.3 million people have been vaccinated. The number of COVID-19 cases accumulated since the beginning of the health emergency total 26 million, and the deaths associated with the disease total 232,000.
Eduardo Martínez, TeleSUR, Ciudad de México.
Antigua and Barbuda received on Tuesday a batch of 20,000 doses of the Sinopharm vaccine, donated by China as part of an initiative by the ALBA trade bloc to ensure fair distribution of shots across Latin America and the Caribbean. Through the ALBA Bank, the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty established an air bridge, working with Venezuela's flagship airline Confianza to deliver the vaccines to the Caribbean nation, where Prime Minister Gaston Brownie received the shipment from Raul Licausi, president of the ALBA Bank. With these doses, Antigua and Barbuda will be able to vaccinate almost 40% of its population. Russia's Sputnik V vaccine against COVID-19 is around 90% effective against the highly contagious Delta variant of the novel coronavirus, according to its developers. The creators of Sputnik V on Tuesday refuted unfounded media reports of a sharp decline in the effectiveness of the Russian vaccine against the highly contagious variant. Gamaleya Institute researchers confirmed that the reduction of the effectiveness of the vaccine was 2.6 times lower against the variant first discovered in India, meaning it still provides a high level of protection. In comparison, experts pointed out that studies carried out with the Pfizer and Moderna shots under the same conditions show that effectiveness against the Delta variant was much lower. Demand for vaccination seems to be high in Indonesia. On Tuesday, thousands of people gathered at a vaccination center in the city of Tangerang, but were blocked from entering as authorities said they didn't have the shots to administer. The city administration said it had prepared 5,000 doses of China's CoronaVac vaccine to be administered during the day. A process of online registration was in place, but it appears many people were unaware and turned up hoping for a job. Indonesia has seen cases spike in recent days after having passed 2 million official infections. The central government's program aims to administer 2 million vaccine shots a day. Indian pharmaceutical company Cipla has been granted emergency use authorization for the country's drugs regulator to import the COVID-19 vaccine developed by Moderna. The head of India's COVID-19 task force stated the authorization was granted to the Mumbai-based pharmaceutical company and that it would have to submit a safety assessment of the vaccine before rolling it out for a large-scale immunization program. The Moderna vaccine will be the fourth to be administered in the country after AstraZeneca, Covaxin and Sputnik V. India has so far applied both doses of vaccines to less than 5% of its population. Health experts say the nation still needs to raise its daily vaccination numbers significantly before any last surge hits. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Belgium, hundreds of immigrants staged a hunger strike, demanding medical care in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. They are undocumented foreign citizens in Belgium left on their own due to the migratory situation. They demand the human right to public health care as granted by Belgian laws. Some sew their lips together as a means of protest, while others claim that they have not had solid food since 23rd of May. Somalia's political leaders have agreed to hold a long-delayed presidential election in October, following months of deadlock that at times turned violent. The Prime Minister's office unveiled the timetable for indirect parliamentary and presidential elections in a statement on Twitter, saying stakeholders had agreed to a roadmap for a vote on October 10th, following 2 days of talks in the capital Mogadishu. President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed and the leaders of Somalia's 5 states had been unable to agree on the terms of a vote before his term lapsed in February, triggering a constitutional crisis. The political impasse exploded into violence in April, when negotiations collapsed and the lower house of parliament extended the president's mandate by 2 years. Under pressure, the president reversed the mandate extension and ordered his prime minister to reconvene with state leaders to work towards elections. Ethiopia's military reportedly broke into a UNICEF office in the capital of the northern Tigray region, Mekelle, confiscating satellite equipment described as much needed to carry out humanitarian work.
Making it even more difficult for our staff to work and deliver humanitarian assistance. We call for calm and restraint and appeal to all parties to the conflict to abide by international law, to protect civilians, including people who have been displaced, and to ensure that humanitarian workers can continue to exercise their duties and reach as many people as they can, which are in need of vital assistance right now.
The allegations from the UN Refugee Agency come after an unilateral ceasefire was declared by the government, following the advance of Tigray's former leaders who retook control of Mekelle, sending federal government officials fleeing and sparking celebrations from residents. The nearly 8-month war was pushed hundreds of thousands to the brink of famine, while aid agencies and the UN have repeatedly denounced abuses by Ethiopian government forces and those of neighboring Eritrea, which are supporting them. Israeli bulldozers backed by armored soldiers started mass demolitions in Silwan, a Palestinian neighborhood in occupied East Jerusalem, to make way for illegal settlements. The operation began with a police raid. They cordoned off Al Bustan section and tore down a Palestinian-owned butcher's shop, the Palestinian news agency Wafa reported. The shop was one of the 17 structures slated for destruction after the occupying regime announced the end of a deadline for 13 Palestinian families to self-demolish their homes and other structures in the neighborhood under the pretext that they had been built without a permit. Protesters were met with tear gas and sticks. The Palestinian neighborhood of Silwan is inhabited by some 33,000 people. And in Beirut, resistance leaders of Palestine and Lebanon agreed on establishing a brotherly axis of resistance against the Israeli regime. Ismaili Haniyeh of Hamas and Sayed Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah met in Beirut on Tuesday. They discussed strategies to achieve the decisive and ultimate victory over the Israeli regime. During the meeting, the two sides held talks on the details and repercussions of Operations Sword of Al-Quds, referring to the launching of some 4,000 missiles on Israeli territory from May 11th from the Israeli blockaded Gaza Strip. The offensive was in retaliation for Israeli settlers and security forces' aggressions against worshippers in Jerusalem during Ramadan. The operation was considered an important victory for the Palestinian resistance. In Russia, a cyclone left more than 130,000 people without electricity in 13 regions. Met authorities announced that the cyclone, with wind gusts of up to 72 kilometers per hour, affected over 47,000 homes. The strong winds also knocked down trees, which fell on homes and vehicles. Moscow also saw torrential rains. Almost 53,000 people, as well as 35 public facilities, are still without power. And China advises the United States to focus on their own problems and not to create them in foreign territories. While cases of forced labor and modern slavery abound in the U.S., Washington is criticizing the human rights situation in other countries. Chinese delegate Jian Duan said. The Global Slavery Index estimated at least 500,000 people live under slavery conditions in the United States. And as part of the celebrations to mark 100 years of the Chinese Communist Party, a grand show was held at Beijing's National Stadium, dubbed the Bird's Nest. Chinese President Xi Jinping presided over the show, held 3 days before the Chinese Communist Party's 100th anniversary on July 1st. The carefully choreographed scenes illustrated the history of Communist China from the founding of the party in Shanghai in 1921 to Mao's Long March. There were also greetings from the Chinese astronauts currently in space. A special place was dedicated to the highly successful fight against COVID-19 as a victory of the Communist Party organization and proof of resilience of the Chinese. The coronavirus is virtually eradicated in China, and the economy has revived thanks to the measures adopted from the beginning of the outbreak. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.